If you're on the fence about spending a good chunk of cash on a new controller, I get it. You want to know if the RANE actually gives you something you can use in a real gig, not just a shiny piece of hardware. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What most people don't realize when they start looking at a 4-channel mixer is how much the workflow changes from a 2-deck setup. The RANE isn't just for decks glued together, it's built around Serato's stems technology, which separates a track into instrumental, vocal, bass, and drums on the fly. In practice, that means if you're playing a house track and the crowd wants a vocal-only moment, you can pull the vocal stem out with a single button and keep the groove going. For mobile DJs who often have to adapt to sudden requests, that level of instant flexibility can be the difference between a flat set and a moment that feels custom-made for the room. The first thing I looked at was how the controller plugs into a laptop. RANE gave us 2 USB ports that you can swap between 2 computers without having to rewire the whole rig. In a club that shares a laptop between 2 resident DJs, that swappability saves a minute or 2 time you'd otherwise spend hunting for a spare cable. The switchable phono input is another practical touch. If you still like to dust off a turntable for a few classic vinyl cuts, you can drop it into the mix without reconfiguring the whole signal chain. When you sit down at the unit, the 8.5-inch higher resolution Jog Wheels are the first thing you notice. They're not the massive 9-inch wheels you see on some high-end club boards, but the extra half-inch of surface gives you enough finger real estate to make fine pitch bends and cue jogs without feeling cramped. The central color display under each wheel shows BPM and an overview waveform, which is a quiet game-changer when you're trying to line up a vocal stem with a drum break. It's not a full-screen LCD, but the information is exactly what most DJs need at a glance, and it keeps the deck from looking cluttered. The internal FX suite is where the creative freedom claim starts to feel concrete. With 24 paddle-triggered effects, you can drop a reverb on the vocal stem while simultaneously filtering the bass. Because the FX are assigned to separate paddles rather than a single knob, you can layer them without having to reach for the software. In a live setting I tested, I could start a filter sweep on the drums, then hit a delay paddle on the vocal a few bars later, all without lifting a finger from the mixer. That kind of hands-free control is useful for DJs who want to keep the focus on track selection rather than digging through menus mid-set. Now for the part most buyers wrestle with: price versus real-world payoff. The RANE sits in the upper mid-range for DJ controllers, so you need to be clear about the value you're extracting. If you're a bedroom DJ who mostly mixes 2 tracks and never uses stems, you'll likely be paying for capabilities you'll never touch. On the other hand, if you already run a weekly club slot, a wedding gig, or a festival booth where you're expected to remix on the fly, the stems workflow can actually shorten set preparation time. Instead of pre-making vocal-only or instrumental versions of every track, you can pull them straight from Serato's library, which claims instant access to over 100 million tracks. That library depth matters when you're trying to keep a set fresh night after night. One practical limitation I ran into is the absence of dedicated performance pads for hot cues and loops. The RANE relies on the jog wheel paddles for FX, but if you like to trigger multiple hot cues with a single tap, you'll have to fall back to the laptop keyboard or a separate pad controller. It's not a deal-breaker, but it's something to keep in mind if your style leans heavily on rapid cue juggling. Also, because the unit is a full-size mixer, it's not the most portable option for DJs who travel light. It weighs a bit more than a typical 2-deck controller, and the dual USB ports mean you need to bring a short power cable for each laptop if you're swapping between them. Who should walk away? If you're just starting out, have a modest budget, and are comfortable with a 2-deck layout, you'll probably get more bang for your buck with a simpler controller that still offers solid jog wheels and basic FX. If you're an experienced DJ who already uses Serato and wants to explore stems without buying a separate 4-channel mixer, the RANE slots nicely into that workflow. It